At the start of the First Punic War, the Romans won several notable victories in Sicily, expanding their influence over the center of the island. After these initial successes, the war on land ground to a halt. Smaller forts in the area would change possession countless times, but no major victory could be won in the rugged terrain of Sicily. The Romans were masters of land warfare, but the Carthaginians controlled the seas. The Romans realized that their only chance of beating Carthage was to bring the fight to them, and they constructed a large fleet. Punic ships ruled the Mediterranean for centuries, and now the Romans, who had no naval tradition of their own, were preparing to meet them head-on. Chance would have it that one of the Punic quinqueremes, a state-of-the-art ship of antiquity, ran aground on Italian shores. By copying this shipwreck, the Romans constructed an entire fleet from scratch. According to some accounts, it took them only 60 days to achieve this unbelievable feat. In 260 BC, the Roman fleet, numbering 100 quinqueremes and 20 smaller triremes, under the command of a consul admiral, set sail for the first time. It didn't take long before the two sides clashed off the coast of Sicily. Although the Punic ships were better made and their sailors better trained, the Romans incredibly came out on top in their very first real naval engagement, the Battle of Mylae. This was all thanks to the Corvus, a drawbridge positioned on the bow of Roman ships. Corvus would drop down on the deck of the Punic ship, creating a bridge between the two vessels. This would turn the naval engagement into a land battle that the Roman legions could easily win. With this newfound naval supremacy, the Romans were ready to take the fight to Carthage. Lucius Manlius Vulso and Marcus Atilius Regulus were elected consuls in 256 BC. Realizing that there was no way of winning the war in Sicily, they decided to mount a full-scale invasion of Africa and attack Carthage itself. For this, the seas would have to be cleared and the crossing to Africa secured. To this end, the Romans constructed a massive fleet numbering 330 warships in total. The fleet set sail from Italy with close to 100,000 oarsmen powering the ships. They crossed to Messana and continued south along the Sicilian coast. They sailed past Syracuse, rounded the tip of Sicily, and reached the main Roman host station near Cape Ecnomus. The best of the Roman infantry was chosen to board the ships, and each quinquereme was carrying 120 marines in addition to 300 oarsmen already on board. The Carthaginians saw this as an existential threat and gathered an even larger force determined to stop the invasion. 350 ships with more than 150,000 men on board, the largest fleet ever assembled by the city, sailed from Africa to Lilybaeum and then to Heraclea Minoa. These astronomical numbers are provided by Polybius. A grand total of 680 ships and 290,000 men would make the Battle of Cape Ecnomus possibly the largest naval battle in history. Although some later battles from the First and Second World Wars come close in terms of the total number of men, there is no battle that can match it in sheer scale. Polybius himself best describes the magnitude of the battle. It must have been amazing to have witnessed it all in person, but it is hardly less astonishing even for someone who only reads about it and judges the magnitude of the risk to either side and the scale of their armament and resources, just from the number of men and ships. Some modern scholars reject these numbers. It was customary for the ancient authors to inflate the numbers in order to embellish the achievements of the winning side. The scholars analyzed the number of ships available to each side in the years prior to the First Punic War and concluded that neither side could have access to upwards of 300 ships. But we have to remember that the First Punic War was the largest naval conflict of antiquity, and considerable resources from both sides were redirected to expand naval capabilities. Polybius was a Greek historian, and unlike his Roman counterparts, whose main goal was to glorify Roman exploits, Polybius put utmost care to present a real version of events. To this end, he used sources written from the Carthaginian perspective that are lost to history. That is why, in the absence of better literary sources, we tend to lean towards the numbers provided by Polybius. One thing that he was probably mistaken on was the number of men in the Carthaginian navy. He assumed that all Punic ships carried as many men as the Roman quinqueremes, and from this, he arrived at the number of 150,000 sailors. Considering that some of the ships were smaller triremes that could carry fewer men, and that the ships boarded by Roman marines were easily taken, we can surmise that there were somewhat fewer men on the Carthaginian side than actually reported. But whatever the actual numbers were, we can be certain that the upcoming battle was truly a spectacle of naval warfare. All pieces now in position, the Romans set sail along the coast of Sicily. Unaware of the strong Carthaginian presence, the Romans were prepared for both a naval engagement and a landing in Africa. Part of the fleet were the horse transports towed by large warships. The true number of horses is unknown, but during the later campaign in Africa, Regulus had access to at least 500 cavalry. On the other hand, the Carthaginians were focused purely on fighting at sea. Aware of their weak position in Libya, they were reluctant to let the Romans cross the sea. The Romans arranged their fleet in 4 different divisions, known as squadrons 1 to 4. The first 2 squadrons formed a simple wedge, with each consul commanding one side and their larger flagships. The third squadron completed a triangle with the first 2. Ships in the third were towing horse transports. Behind them, the fourth squadron was arranged in a straight line extending on either side of the third squadron. From this, we can surmise that the fourth squadron was more numerous than the first 3. They protected the rear of the formation and acted as the ultimate reserve. This fourth line was nicknamed the Triarii, taking their name from the last line of the Roman land forces. It's clear that in these few short years that the Romans were involved in naval warfare, their crews and tactics improved significantly. Polybius even praises the practicality of the formation. It was dense enough to protect them from ramming, but loose enough to easily maneuver. On the other hand, the Carthaginians were formed up in a single straight line. But upon seeing the Roman positioning, they split up their force in hopes of breaking the Roman formation. Hamilcar, commander of the Sicilian forces, was positioned in the middle. His plan was to retreat after first making contact with the enemy. The Romans would then hopefully chase after him, breaking their tight formation. His left wing, the one closest to the Sicilian shore, broke off from the rest of the Punic line and sailed close to land, aiming to strike the Romans from the side. Hanno was commanding the fastest ships in the fleet positioned on the right wing. They were extended past the Roman formation, hoping to envelop them once the battle started. The plan was to turn the battle into a series of smaller encounters in which the Carthaginians could use their superior ramming skills. When the Romans spotted the loose formation of the Carthaginian center, they perceived that as a weakness and rushed in to meet them. As instructed, the Punic line retreated, with Romans pursuing them. The third squadron was the slowest of the lot, and together with the Triarii fell behind. When the Romans were separated enough, Hamilcar sent a signal and the Carthaginians turned around and attacked the Romans. The Carthaginians were faster and could easily engage and fall back as needed, while the Romans had strength on their side. Any ship successfully hit with the Corvus was as good as gone. While this engagement was raging on, the Carthaginian flanks didn't stand by idly. Hanno with his faster ships on the right enveloped the Romans and attacked the Triarii. At the same time, the Punic left formed a solid line and rushed to meet the third squadron. Panicking, they abandoned the horse transports and engaged the Carthaginians. Hamilcar's plan worked as intended, the fleets were split and the battle turned into 3 separate engagements. Although the battle was fought on Hamilcar's terms, the Roman Corvus would prove insurmountable yet again. With both consuls fighting in the thick of things, the Romans were encouraged to stand their ground. Although the Carthaginians had some limited success with rammings, the sheer amount of ships present nullified this advantage. In time, the Punic resolve wavered and they fled from the scene. Lucius started gathering captured ships and securing them, while his colleague Marcus turned to help the rest of the fleet. The third and fourth Roman squadrons had much less success than the first 2, and they were on the brink of collapse. He first engaged Hanno and his ships. The Triarii were reinvigorated when they saw Carthaginians engaged from the back. They too pressed forth, and Hanno, with the remnants of his fleet, was put to flight. The Romans now rushed together to aid the third squadron. Lucius had by now secured the ships and he too was rushing in. The third squadron was pressed against the shore, unable to move. They would have surely been completely destroyed, but the fear of the Corvus held the Carthaginians at bay and they refused to engage. Rushing in from all sides, the Romans surrounded what was left of the Punic fleet. 50 ships were captured, with only a few strugglers managing to slip out. The greatest fleet the Carthaginians ever assembled was shattered within an afternoon. The way was now open for the Romans to invade North Africa and bring the fight to their enemy. The Battle of Cape Ecnomus, possibly the largest naval battle in history, has thus ended. Out of the 350 Carthaginian ships, more than 30 were sunk, with a further 64 captured. Out of the 330 Roman ships, only 24 were lost, none of them captured. It's unknown how many men died on either side. It speaks volumes that the Roman commanders could effectively control the large fleet and maneuver it around in the later stages of the battle. Their actions prevented a disaster waiting to happen behind them. In contrast, after the initial plan of false retreat, Hamilcar had little influence on the actions of his fleet. Although the plan was executed perfectly at the beginning, the Carthaginians had no answer to the Roman corvus. If the 3rd Squadron had fallen early, the reinforcement from the Carthaginian left would have spelled disaster for the Romans. It's entirely possible that these large and cumbersome fleets were more suited for the corvus and Roman boarding actions than to the skillful maneuvering of the Carthaginians. The fact that not one Roman ship was captured is evidence enough that the Carthaginian ships carried fewer soldiers on deck. Once the chorus struck, it spelled the end for the Punic crew. The 3 parts of the Carthaginian navy sailed off in different directions, leaving them unable to pose any further resistance. The Romans came ashore in Sicily, stopping to rest their men, replenish the supplies, and fix any damaged ships. When the fleet was ready, they set sail for Africa. Join us next time as we discuss the African campaign and the end of the First Punic War.